Hello, everybody. Me again. This time weighing in on the 145-pound division. People want me to do a breakdown of the UFC Mexico Fight Night card. Yeah, the problem is only two significant fights really on it, which is a co-main event, which is Brian Ortega defeating Yair Rodriguez by arm triangle choke in round number 3, and, of course, the main event. So the more interesting of those two stories to me is the co-main event. And what that means for the 145-pound division. It's a little background. Everybody knows Ilia Topuria just knocked out Alexander Volkanovski to claim the 145-pound title. Alexander Volkanovski is the greatest 145-pounder of his era. I put him second all-time behind Jose Aldo. If you want to put him first, I would understand that argument completely. But what do we have? We have a new champion who's been dominant in his last 3 fights, which was the most significant. Bryce Mitchell, Josh Emmett, now Alexander Volkanovski. Crazy power, powerful grappler. Bryce Mitchell's a big dude, wrestling background, and he got nothing done against Ilia Topuria. Josh Emmett's built like a brick house, really strong right hand, got nothing done against Ilia Topuria. And what do you want to say about Volkanovski? Knocked out in round 2. So the problem is the attitude of Ilia Topuria seems to be, I need new challenges. Nobody's worthy, nobody's worthy, nobody's worthy. Here's the problem. It's an old division. 145, much like 185. 55 a little bit, although it's getting new blood. The problem is these are divisions that have a lot of fighters who have already fought for a title in them. The top 10 is full of guys who have already been there. But none of them have fought Ilia Topuria. So when Topuria says, I want a new challenge, I want a new challenge, I want a new challenge, you haven't fought any of these guys. You fought none of them. Most of the time, when a long-running champion loses the title, the first, generally couple of title defenses from the new guy are guys that are still in the division, who are veteran names, who have a lot of juice, who get their title opportunity. All right, Chris Weidman beat Vitor Belfort. John Jones had to go through a bunch of guys who were of the old school already, who had either been former champions or had fought for titles already. It's just the nature of the... You don't get a brand new set of contenders because you're a champion now. It's the same contenders that have always been there. And 145 is just aging out right now. When you look at the top 10, obviously your champ is Ilia Topuria. Number 1, Alexander Volkanovski, former champion. Topuria already knocked him out. 2 is Max Holloway, perennial contender, the number 2 145-pounder of this particular era, meaning the Volk era. 3rd is Yair Rodriguez. They haven't updated the ratings yet because it's Monday. They update them tomorrow. 3 is Yair Rodriguez. He'll swap places with Brian Ortega, who's currently at number 4. So probably Ortega goes to 3, Yair goes to 4. Movsar Evloev, number 5, undefeated. Could be a title contender. Topuria says that he's boring and doesn't want that fight. Number 6 is Arnold Allen. Number 7 is Josh Emmett, whom he has already beaten. 8, Calvin Kattar. 9, Giga Chikadze. 10, Bryce Mitchell, whom he has already defeated. So what do you see? You see a bunch of veteran guys packed in at the top, from Volk to Ortega in the top 4, which will be Yair Rodriguez in the top 4. Movsar Evloev, Arnold Allen are the only kind of new names. Evloev, the better of them. They fought already. Topuria's not just going to get a whole new crop of title contenders. That's not how it works. You become champion, therefore the guy before me eliminated all these guys and I don't have to fight them. It doesn't work that way. They're old contenders. Yeah, but they're not your contenders. You still have to fight these guys. So Ilia is kind of just talking down his nose at everybody and every possible title contender. He's not a line him up, knock him down kind of guy yet. That might change. So what did we learn last Saturday when it came to Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez? Number 1, Brian Ortega in that first round just looked off. Just looked off. Couldn't see the offense coming. Ate some good punches. Ate some good ground and pound. Gave up some takedowns. Everything went wrong. It was one of those things where, like in a football team, it's just the first snap is bungled and you end up giving up 14 points before you know what happens. It was that kind of start for Brian Ortega. Yair Rodriguez looked very, very good. He doesn't have, unfortunately, a ton of one-shot power. Yair Rodriguez is a tricky, versatile, awkward guy. He can get a knockout, but he's got to really find the button. He's not... If you had taken the amount of damage Brian Ortega against Yair Rodriguez against a harder puncher, he might have been in trouble. Ilia Topuria finishes him in the first round with those punches. Ilia hits really hard. But Brian Ortega also has a great chin. Remember, he went the distance with Alexander Volkanovski, even though he got the dog piss beaten out of him. Then got to round 4. There was a doctor stoppage, but, took some wicked shots from Max Holloway and stayed in the fight. The guy has a decent chin. So the beating he was taking in round 1, able to bounce back from that in round 2 and winning that round. One judge gave it 10-8, but it was tied on the other 2 judges' scorecards heading into the 3rd round. So he was able to bounce back, right the ship. Then in round number 3, gets a takedown, gets full mount, arm triangle, and it's over. So did he make the case that he's the guy who's going to beat Ilia Topuria? Beat Yair Rodriguez, and he's the number 3 guy, and Max Holloway already has a fight, and Volk just fought. So he may just be the default guy at this point. And if you study the history of MMA, a lot of title opportunities just go to the default guy. We needed a guy. This guy was ready. Here you go. The timing worked out for this particular guy. One of the things about the introduction of rankings, which didn't always exist, is, well, that guy's number 5. Why does he get the opportunity before this guy? Before we had rankings, they threw in whoever was on a streak and available, and you didn't have a number next to their name to tell you that they shouldn't be there. I know it's hard to understand. But now we're looking at that, where he just may be the guy where Volk just fought him. Max Holloway's fighting Justin Gaethje. I also don't think Max Holloway is going to be in any shape to fight anybody for a little while after Justin Gaethje. I think he probably loses that one. But Brian Ortega could just be the default guy. It sucks a bit that Brian Ortega looked as shaky as he did in this fight. I don't think many people Monday post-fight are going, man, Brian Ortega is going to beat Ilia Topuria. He didn't have that kind of performance. Looked terrible in round number 1, came back, but in many ways, Yair Rodriguez led him back into the fight in a way that Ilia Topuria probably won't. So he didn't elevate we didn't see this fight and go, man, he looks like a world beater. Yes, he did win. But I don't think there's a lot of confidence now that he's going to beat Ilia Topuria necessarily. Now, doesn't mean he doesn't deserve the title shot. See, it just gets a little wonky here. So 145 is just an old division. It's just full of veterans who have already had their shot, and they might get another one because there's a new champion. And people forget that that's something people kind of look forward to a little bit, where Colby Covington lost to Kamaru Usman twice, and I remember saying and thinking, well, he's not going to get a title shot until it's somebody other than Kamaru Usman. Ended up being Leon Edwards. He gets a title shot. Every now and then there's this guy who can't get past the champ, and they're just sitting there hoping somebody else takes the belt eventually. Now, does it mean you win the title? Not necessarily, but there's that recycling. Okay, how do these guys do against this new champion? We know Volk can dominate everybody. Can Ilia Topuria do the same thing? But in the modern era of MMA, where it's big fight, big money, I want to make my payday, I don't see a lot of blockbuster pay-per-view sellers at 145 right now. A rematch with Volk probably does pretty well. If Max Holloway manages to beat Justin Gaethje, which is a big if, that would be a good one to put on. But I just don't see a lot of people burning their way up the charts. The thing about Yair Rodriguez is that would have been a great story, and always look for the great story. Always look for it. Yair Rodriguez, Mexican fighter, doesn't like Ilia Topuria, Spanish speaker, do that one in Spain, and booyah, Mexico versus Spain, what a great story. Yes, Brian Ortega is Mexican-American. It doesn't quite have the same cachet, and Brian Ortega has, to my knowledge, not expressed any personal dislike for Ilia Topuria. So that's kind of where we are right now. Now, should Volk get the rematch? Should Volk walk in and get a rematch? Look, he's done enough that I think it warrants a rematch if he really wants it. If you're the company guy and you've done everything the company, UFC in this case, has asked of you, short notice fights, move it up a weight class, he's been willing to do all this stuff. Never badmouth the company, anything. Hasn't put up a ton of fight. Haven't heard about him wanting more money to fight different guys. And so you could say that the UFC owes him a little bit. Does he beat Ilia Topuria? Not from what I saw, but he still, I think if he demanded the rematch, I think there's some idea that the UFC should reward the kind of conduct that he has brought to the UFC. Never really complained, always kept his head down and worked. But that's the issue right now at 145 is there isn't that blazing new contender, and we're going to have to recycle a few before we get there. Should Volk take time off? Interesting question. Maybe. Remember, this is 2 knockouts in a row. Right? Your brain doesn't get better at taking shots. It gets worse at taking shots. That being said, does time off help? Yeah, you don't want consecutive concussions, multiplies the damage that you're taking. But also at his age, he doesn't have all the time in the world regardless. Sometimes it's the years, mostly it's the mileage that wears you down. But the years don't help. Get what I'm saying? 10 fights ages you more than 10 years, right? But still, years don't help, especially when Volk is at the age he's at right now. So it's a difficult. Should he take years off when he doesn't have very many left? That is a huge question. Only he can really answer that, and the problem is fighters are really bad at answering that question. They'll always err on the side usually of getting back in there immediately, and I certainly don't think that's a good idea. I don't know if you should take a whole year off. Definitely take a few months and reevaluate things and figure out where he is and see where his head is, literally and figuratively, before we move on at 145 pounds, because you have a great champion in Ilia Topuria who just won the title. It's all this excitement, but he seems to be shooting down every single title contender. Going back and forth on social media with Islam Makhachev. Okay, well, you just won the title. I would not recommend, I don't think Dana White's going to want him to move up to 155 pounds anytime soon. So while I have a little time, Brandon Moreno losing to Brandon Royval, I think the beatings are, not beatings, I mean, he hasn't lost every fight. He's lost 2 in a row, but I think the wars are catching up a little bit with Brandon Moreno. Part of the problem is at 125, you got to be fast, you got to be explosive, you got to be really light on your feet, your timing's got to be really good, and all of those qualities, pardon me, don't age well. None of them age well. You lose speed early on in your career. You lose pop and explosiveness early on in your career. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions to the rule, but if you look at the history of combat sports, and sports in general, the lighter somebody has to be and the faster they have to be, the shorter their career is. It just is what it is. Heavyweight boxers, George Foreman famously won it at 45. Right? That's possible at heavyweight. Don't know of any lightweights that have done that. Right? 147 pounds, they tend to be young. Terrence Crawford is an exception to the rule. He's a comparatively old welterweight. So Brandon Moreno, to me, it seemed like in those later rounds when he would normally, earlier on in his career, be the guy who finished stronger, seemed to wear down a little bit. He seemed to wear down just a wee bit. Also, another thing that I want to put out there, let me know what you think in the comment section, is he a really great fighter who just matched up well with Deiveson Figueiredo, meaning he spent so much of the bulk of his career fighting Deiveson Figueiredo. He fought 4 times, which is an anomaly in this sport, that you have to ask yourself, and I'm not saying this is the end of his career by any stretch of the imagination, but look, let's say if it were, did he just line up really well with Deiveson Figueiredo? Because I didn't see a guy, and 125 is tough, I didn't see a DJ, I didn't see even a Henry Cejudo back in the day who was a level better than division. He's very, very good. He's excellent. He's right at the top, but so is everybody else. And I feel like 1 point either way, and remember, he lost the championship on a very, very close decision. So it's this idea that Brandon Moreno was kind of floating right there at the top along with everybody else. So on a good night or a bad night, he's going to win or he's going to lose. I don't see a guy who's elevated, oh man, this is going to champion for a long time. I don't necessarily see that. And it could be that Deiveson Figueiredo, he just happened to kind of have his number in the majority of those fights. But can he be dominant over the long term? Having lost 2 in a row, that's an interesting question. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section. I'll be back soon. Later, guys.